great. So then when I ask you about the Erie Canal with your history background, what does that mean to you?
Well, it's something that I taught when I taught New York State history, so I guess part of what it means is that it was the economic engine that drove Western New York for a full century.
Mm-hmm. So when you think Brockport specifically, what is it that you know about Brockport and the Erie Canal?
Well, one, it was a terminus on the Erie Canal when they were digging it. Most of the port towns that are named, like Fairport, Spencerport, Brockport, usually the town grew up because that year that's where the canal digging stopped. And Brockport in particular became a main center for industry because of the canal.
Mm-hmm. So like what kind of industry specifically was there?
Well, everything from boat building, barge building for the canal. Brockport produced many of the barges that were on the canal, probably more than any place else. Also, it was originally the home of the reaper, and Brockport produced the first mass production of the reapers. We actually had two reaper companies in Brockport at one time, and it was one of the largest industrial complexes in the United States at the time.
Mm-hmm. So then, what? Just being here for how many years have you lived in Brockport specifically?
I've lived in Brockport since 1969.
Have you seen changes, the canal's function change over the course of time being here?
I can take it actually back a little farther than that. I grew up right near the canal in Rochester, New York. And I remember as a youth, because I'm 74, I remember as a youth seeing a lot of commercial traffic on the canal. We'd get all kinds of barges. Much of the oil that was delivered was not delivered in those days by tanker trucks. It came on the canal, and that's why all of the oil companies tend to be located very near the canal. Even the local Brockport oil company is right next to the canal because at one point they offloaded the material there. In general, so it was commercial up through about the mid-60s, and there were pleasure boats, but its main focus was it was a commercial vehicle for hauling heavy freight. Since that time, the canal went through a downtime. I'd say in the 70s and early 80s, they hadn't made any push to really sell it as a recreational waterway. But from the mid-80s on, both New York State and the local governments along the canal have sold the idea of canal cruises. And now I think there are two separate companies that cruise the canal. And I know every year in Brockport, which is one of the main stops on those canal cruises, because we're the oldest, how would I put it, the oldest town that still has the appearance of what it looked like during the canal. Like if you were doing a movie and you covered our streets over with dirt, with the exception of one building that's a new building in Main Street, it would look like it did when the canal was booming. So,
do you think people who live in Brockport or just along the canal at all, do you think that we tend to take the canal for granted?
Absolutely. It's just something that's there, and you always, I think, don't appreciate what's there all the time. I can tell a funny story about that.
Yes.
The Olympic trials were here for wrestling a number of years ago, and my children were young. And we were walking along the canal, and we found a bunch of wrestling fans from Oklahoma with bottles getting water to take home that was filled with Erie Canal water. To them, it was a really big deal.
Yeah.
And we were like, what are they doing? It's just canal water. But it's just like when we go places, we pick up a rock from the place or something for a souvenir. They were getting water out of the Erie Canal. They thought that was the best thing since sliced bread.
That's amazing. So then, how do you show your appreciation for the canal to this day?
I would say mostly because it's a great place to walk. My wife and I walk on it all the time. I'm also a track coach and cross-country coach, and people run on it. But I think the best thing is to just watch the boats go by and maybe to have lunch, on one of the places that overlooks the canal and wave to the people. And we get all kinds of great visitors who just love the town because they found it by tripping on the Erie Canal. It's a major biking route now too. And many people you see, they're biking the entire length of the canal all the way to Albany and along the Mohawk.
I feel like it'd be a good little vacation or road trip to do for sure.
I've often thought about it. I would like to do it.
You have thought about it, have you? I'd be interested to see that for sure.
That would be good.
Thank you so much for doing this. So.
You're welcome.
Cool. And I will end